Yeah, what's good, everybody? Shout out to everybody in the whole world, because we represent the underworld. UTV Raps, O Styles, what's good, my brother? This is Commotion representing Fresh Flow. You know how we do, man.
Now we got my man Q-Mo.
What's good, what's good?
Hood Superhero about to drop, bro.
Yeah, man, part 3, man. I'm excited for it.
You've been working hard.
Yeah, man, it's been a long time coming. I finished all my my obligations to the global rap revolution. Mm-hmm. So that project's going to be dropping too.
Shout out to the squad.
Shout out to Knights Roundtable Ciphers. Mm-hmm. We finished a lot of the projects with Fresh Flow ENT. Mm-hmm. So even once my album drops, we'll even have another mixtape after that dropping, because we have stuff that didn't make the first mixtape or the second album that we can still put out. So
where can they find those Jones too?
Yeah, man, pretty much anywhere you can find your music. So Tidal, Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, Reverb Nation. You can either find Fresh Flow projects or projects from some of the individual members in Fresh Flow. We be out there, man.
You know what it is, your boy Stickity O Styles, chilling with my man Q-Mo, Commotion, Fresh Flow in the building. I know you do a lot of work with kids.
As far as working with the youth right now, trying to support the Reclaiming Our Boys program, which is run by Boyd, Building Our Youth Development. That's run by Executive Director Bruce Boyd, who has his own program where they're teaching character development, financial literacy, young entrepreneurship, and leadership development, primarily for young men of color, in particular African American young men. And I think he's doing an awesome job. So, to be able to support an initiative that is going to positively affect young men who look like us, exactly. Especially having sons myself, and knowing a lot of the young men that have positive influences, especially positive male influences in their lives, and we can give them that mentorship, that support, that guidance, and give them some positive role models. I like to be a part of that. And then we got the Youth Business League, so that's working with Harry Walker on that initiative too. Again, for cooperative economics and entrepreneurship. It's something that we're supporting, giving kids, helping them get set up in their own businesses, and doing different tasks that will give them the skill sets to start businesses now. They don't have to wait till they're 16 to go get working papers, because they can be their own consultants right now, getting
that's something we definitely need too, man. We need that across the board. We need that.
Yeah, for what it's worth, a lot of people that are in our generation that might not be thinking on it. They might want that, not know how to do it, but if we can teach them young, they'll aspire for more by the time they get to our age.
That's real talk. And like I tell a lot of people that ask me about my show, they say, do you know these artists? Yeah, most of the artists on my show I know. A lot of them are my fam, not my peoples like that. You know what I'm saying? And we on a wavelength where we can do what we do as far as promotion, rap. We're not just putting out music that don't have no substance.
Right.
Like the artists I deal with have substance in their music, and that's why it's underground, that's why it's underworld. So definitely stay looking out for my man Commotion, about to drop the Hood Superhero Volume 3.
Yeah, man.
Hosted by me. I'm hosting this joint. We about to show y'all something, man. This is how you do a CD. This is how you drop fire with some magnitude, not just. Shouts to my homie Q-Mo, Fresh Flow ENT. Commotion is definitely the next wave. Let's get it, y'all. Let's go.
Yo, Sticky O Styles, what up? Underworld. LaCar BYOB. Stanhope House. Cooler Cafe, Conscious Youth, Danny Clinch and Asbury Park. Farmer Boys. First Famine. Supreme Alliance. I appreciate all y'all for putting me on. on?
Underworld.
Shout out to Rel, Bugs in the South Jersey Cyphers, what up? But how come I ain't never get put on the Jersey Fresh Jam or Art All Nighter, the Marsden House Cyphers and all that? How come you ain't put me on?
Yeah.
What up? I know y'all see me. I be in y'all town, man. What's
Talk
good?
on that. Let them know how
I don't
you
get
feel.
it. It's like I'm knee deep in freedom of speech, reading and weep. It's easy to creep, count sheep in your sleep. It's, nah, man. I ain't gonna do that.
You can get them.
It's like I think they kind of scared. It's like
they scared of you, bro. Let them know
you
what they supposed to do.
You need to. I don't know, man. It's like
I need you to talk for
it's like you lock your bars before they can break out. Shoot back a paparazzi and call that media takeout. So who's next to catch this tongue lashing from the city where even kitties sticky for gun stashes? Smoked up, knocked off, blown away, blunt ashes. Let's see who can run fastest. Head of the street, fam, running with the best. You the end of the week, man. WTF? 3X banging in your cipher, time's overdue. If I rhyme over you, here's my rhyme overview. What commotions spew, mostly roasting and toasting you. Many y'all call commotions leading a chosen few. Kinetic energy flow with a century. Freeze MCs like mad MP3s on PCs. You be killing your memory mentally, not a word to think. Razor sharpen your pencil, punish you with the pad and pen. Then I just murder the ink. No moment of silence, just violence, sirens, sad music, violence. Don't believe me, to try it, then get your goonies to hire men. Meet the Trenton version of Murder One. Bite a pen, hobnob with goblins. Maybe it's Leviathan, inciting the rioting. Well, come on, invite him then. I'll be ready to fight with them. So I'll build myself up, chewing on these one-word punchlines. Vitamin. So what this tyrant is trying to insinuate that I'm watching disintegrate right from my dinner plate. Principle of the matterism here to administrate the abolition of mainstream. Time to integrate, lyrically renovate, innovating the best weapons. Commotion putting words together is a death sentence. You can't call me out from dead zones. Go to your cemetery and urinate from the headstones. I get it, headstones. If I ain't dead homes, there's a resurrection of real rap in your headphones.
Yes.
Oh man, those styles, bro, I think they scared, man.
They scared of you,
I know
bro.
y'all see me going city to city. I be in your city, y'all didn't even invite me to your cipher to your show. It's all good.
Real talk.
It's just little old Q. I mean, I'm a humble dude. I mean, I just spit from the heart. I show love, man. I don't know, man. I give credit where credit is due, man. Y'all don't see me out with the whole fresh flow camp and all that much. I just mostly roll dolo. Y'all ain't scared, are you? I mean, it's not like I'll out rhyme you or anything. It's like would I really out rhyme you and your whole team? Well, on second thought, maybe you should be scared. Chill.
Coming to you live for Underworld Radio. It's your boy Siggity O Styles. Live for Commotion, Fresh Flow ENT. Y'all scared, man.
Square up, square up. Square up. You bitches in my DMs, it's some square. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. You bitches in my DMs, it's some square. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. You like paparazzi, wanna take a picture of me? Like the Hannibal, you wanna wear the skin off me? Cause I'm sexy and you wish you was fly like me. He got a big dick and I got ass on me. I heard he played you and he made you feel quite crazy. But I got his ring and you ain't got nothing on me. I don't know you, but you say that you know me. You're a lurker like my grandma, you so nosy. Say little bitch, calm down. I'm like Mike Tyson in his prime first round. You think you sick, but you a clown. You got me laughing, you a joke in H-Town. You bitches in my DMs, it's some square. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. You bitches in my DMs, it's some square. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your connections, that's that broke bitch shit. Get that fat transfer, that's that rich bitch shit. You ain't got no edges, I can buy you drops. Call a big booty Judy, cause I heard her shit work. I don't do no dirty shoes, I don't do no short nails. I just do the money walk, like a Mayweather's gal. I just bought me a rollie, but that shit did nothing for me, so I gave it away, cause that shit does not impress me. Little bitch, calm down. I'm like Mike Tyson in his prime first round. You think you slick, but you a clown. You got me laughing, you a joke in H-Town. You bitches in my DMs, it's some square. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. You bitches in my DMs, it's some square. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. Square up. I don't wanna wear no makeup, no wigs, no nothing. I got something to say. Square up, square up.
Coast to coast.
So I've been watching 2.5 Men for a while now.
Yeah, right.
And something about some Charlie Sheen, you know?
What?
I mean, he gets the mad pussy, bro. Like, for real. Look, let me explain. Okay, got a couple freaks. Met them overseas. Said it like a flow. Put them on their knees. I just want that head. Fuck what's in between. I've been fucking frauds. Call me Charlie Sheen. Got a couple freaks. Met them overseas. Said they like to blow. Put them on their knees. I just want that head. Fuck what's in between. I've been fucking frauds. You can call me Charlie Sheen.
The minute I get it, I hit it, I quit it. I push it so good, I just wanna get in it. I'm counting this money, don't care how I spend it. I'm leasing that house that you rent, you attend it. You know how we roll, fly to the top of my wings, I'ma crawl. When I look down, jump into the crowd. Down to the bottom, say look out below. Haters crawl like bugs, they make me itch. Leaning off these drugs, I got that twitch. Need some TV for your mouth because you always talking shit. And if a bitch be trying to snitch, I'll throw my fist, go get a stitch. And I make this shit look easy, no intention to be greedy. Got your girl in a bikini and she built just like a TV. And I knew she in my head, but I ain't know she was a dot. Until we got in bed, fucked around and hit the sky.
Man, you crazy.
I'm insane,
Staying loyal.
never change.
On the daily.
I'm the same, smoking weed to ease my brain. With that ice all on my wrist, it's amazing, I don't freeze. Let me breathe, I'm a freak. You could call me Charlie Sheen.
Got a couple freaks. Met them overseas. Said it like a flow. Put them on their knees. I just want that head. Fuck what's in between. I've been fucking frauds. Call me Charlie Sheen. Got a couple.
Turned a few bars into a gold mine. Now these whack rappers giving me the evil eye. They done opened up the door and let a beast inside. I'm putting jobs on the line, they can't sleep at night. Real reason why these rappers taking acting classes. Law falling off, really, I just can't imagine. Been on beats like I'm talking to a therapist. Get pissed, hit the studio and drop a hit. Be lit, lost, stay with the candle flow. Words leave my lips and travel all across the globe. They rocking off their phone, me I'm rocking off the dome. Spit my verse like I'm on stage at a show. One take, yeah, smell the loot, we taking over. Can't recall the last time I had to lay it over. Drop 16s, 32s, and 48s. All my life rap, substitute me selling weight. And my album date a national holiday. It's like Thanksgiving Day waiting on a plate. Food for thought, man, my music like soul food. Watch me flash across the screen like breaking news. Spit the ugly truth, now my gang sitting pretty. Move my family to the burbs from the inner city. Kinda witty how your boy put it all together. Ross and Legend magnificent, we rich forever. Cemetery pockets filled with dead presidents. Fans see me in the streets, they hopping out their skin. When I'm in a really good situation. Free to roam where I want, but the crib gated. I'm rated #1, cause I'm out here #2. Scratch performing at the club, get paid to walk through it. Finally doing everything I ever dreamed of. About to start ghost writing.
Boy, I swear on my mama, yeah, yeah. Boy, I swear on my mama, yeah, yeah. Boy, I swear on my mama, yeah, yeah. I gotta get this back, I gotta get this cash, Big body Hummer, I pushed the summer, I flew to Mary, and hit Joanna.
Never change up, I'm always on that same shit.
Boy, I swear
they'll make this Millie do a triple flip.
I gotta get it, that's what my mama, yeah, she my #1 sponsor. She write like an author, never went left, for her my love is compressed. I swear I'ma make it, she keep me going, life I'ma keep on just racing. Bag always chasing, under the faces, only one life and I'm taking it. Let me think for a minute, man. Just tryna up all my positions. Life is hard, it can end any minute, man. That's why I'm tryna get every penny, man. Who'd ever thought it'd be me? Down the shit that they do. See when you get more than them, friends you gon' lose by the few. Said that them niggas don't love you, but what they get out of you? That's what my family the fuel. I say my success past due. Boy, I swear on my mama, yeah, yeah. Boy, I swear on my mama, yeah, yeah. Boy, I swear on my mama, yeah, yeah. I gotta get this back, I gotta get this cash, Big body Hummer, I pushed the summer, I flew to Mary, and hit Joanna.
Never change up, I'm always on that same shit.
Boy, I swear
they'll make this Millie do a triple flip.
Dreams the same, it'll never change. Trying to get 100 before I peace out. Convenient with it, peace out. Knots don't fold, stick them all in my peach couch. Artist, hustler, ambition. Change nimmers, they be listening. Energy matter like it's physics. Flipping moolah, I'm a gymnast. Boy, I swear I'ma do what it take to get this bag. Boy, I swear I'm stepping on next, these niggas mad. Run up a check, these niggas ain't never touched a bag. Run up these bands, these niggas ain't never seen no cash. This is my destiny, leaving my legacy. Yeah, when I'm gone, they remember me. This shit is stamped, yeah, they be mailing me. Now everything that I do is now free. I swear on my mama, she raised a king. That's why I deserve all the finer things. I made this move and I just upped my change. Boy, I swear I never change.
Boy, I swear on my mama, yeah, yeah. Boy, I swear on my mama, yeah, yeah. Boy, I swear on my mama, yeah, yeah. I gotta get this back, I gotta get this cash, Big body Hummer, I pushed the summer, I flew to Mary, and hit Joanna.
Never change up, I'm always on that same shit.
Boy, I swear
they'll make this Millie do a triple flip.
Boy, I swear on my mama, yeah, yeah. Boy, I swear on my mama, yeah, yeah. Boy, I swear on my mama, yeah, yeah. I gotta get this back, I gotta get this cash, Boy, I swear on my mama, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Boy, I swear on my mama, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Boy, I swear on my mama, yeah, yeah. I gotta get this back, I gotta get this cash,
Yeah, yeah.
Coast to Coast Mixtapes.com.
But I ain't slipping. These niggas tripping. I'm pistol gripping. Lil' mama keep her hands out, but I ain't tipping. I'm a G, I ain't blood, I ain't crippin'. Yeah, I be sliding, but I ain't slipping. These niggas tripping. I'm pistol gripping. Lil' mama keep her hands out, but I ain't tipping. I'm a G, I ain't blood, I ain't crippin'. These niggas be trippin'. I'm pistol gripping. This thug life, a nigga like me live it. Hoes down, G's up, that's what I scream out. I'm a nigga putting down for the dirty south. What the fuck you talking about? Bitch, you wanna see me fall? You got me fucked up, keep my back against the wall, nuts hang low to the motherfucking floor. Who it is, that nigga coming through the bitches indo, putting it down every time you see me, boy, I'm clean. You can catch a nigga like me up on the scene with my team, know what I mean? Standing tall like Yao Me. Fuck you niggas talking about, bitch, I ain't green, I'm about my green, nigga. And I'm on a mission daily. It's a must these motherfucking streets pay me. How the fuck you think I'm gonna let these niggas face me? You crazy, man, fuck that shit, that's not your lady. Yeah, I'm sliding, but I ain't slipping. These niggas tripping, I'm pistol gripping. Lil' mama keep her hands out, but I ain't tipping. I'm a G, I ain't blood, I ain't crippin'. Yeah, I be sliding, but I ain't slipping. These niggas tripping, I'm pistol gripping. Lil' mama keep her hands out, but I ain't tipping. I'm a G, I ain't blood, I ain't crippin'.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, trying on my palm. Hop in that coupe and my nigga gon' slide. Hop on that dick and that bitch, she gon' ride. Hop in that stolo, my nigga gon' slide. You ain't from that side, won't fuck with them guys. Up in that five, put that right to your eye. Hop in that coupe and my nigga gon' slide. Hop on that dick and that bitch, she gon' ride. Hop in that stolo, my nigga gon' slide. You ain't from that side, won't fuck with them guys. Up in that five, put that right to your eye. Yo, my nigga Chibo shooting like free throw, you already know though. Yo, deep in the street, stood on my 2 feet, gotta stick to the G-Go. Yo, but I play your card right for you, yeah, get jacked, no, this ain't no casino. Yo, I do what I do cause I mastery. I do what I do cause I mastery. Diamonds like water, they drowning. Nigga too clean like down it, yeah. Bitch, I'm a dog like bounty hunter. Run that shit up, no count, yeah. Guns all in my counters. Nigga, you rare, you mountain. When I come in the club, I bring it in. When she come to my house, she played it in. My time gon' come be pacing shit. That's why I'm waiting so patiently. I don't want my hoe no basic shit. Yeah. I don't want my hoe no basic shit. Yeah. I'ma run that check up. We gon' run that check up. Yeah. Hop in that coupe and my nigga gon' slide. Hop on that dick and that bitch, she gon' ride. Hop in that stolo, my nigga gon' slide. You ain't from that side, won't fuck with them guys. Up in that five, put that right to your eye. That coupe and my nigga gon' slide. Hop on that dick and that bitch, she gon' ride. Hop in that stolo, my nigga gon' slide. You ain't from that side, won't fuck with them guys. Up in that five, put that right to your eye. I just hit a little bit, who stay run away? Gotta keep my grass cut for these motherfuckers snake. Don't be talking to these niggas, they be talking to the J. Smile in your face, but I know they gon' hate. With a flow, with a star like a Ray. I just spoke to God the other day, yeah. Died with the 32, Tony with the 40, yeah. Got locked up, John died of boss. It don't really matter what the motherfucker cost. Nigga say something, hit his ass in the jaw. I fuck a baby mama, I hit her raw. I'm a street nigga, y'all deep in the street. Nigga say something, they don't want no beef. Trust $1, all about a dollar. Grew on killers, I hang with robbers. All my niggas, I fuck with shotters. Yeah. Deep in the street, no bossing. Talk like you bought a weed cocking back. Spin the bin, yeah, again and again. Spin the bin, yeah, we bustin' now. Nigga say, son, about trust porn. Call and die, got 100 shots. Hop in that coupe and my nigga gon' slide. Hop on that dick and that bitch, she gon' ride. Hop in that stolo, my nigga gon' slide. You ain't from that side, won't fuck with them guys. Up in that five, put that right to your eye. Hop in that coupe and my nigga gon' slide. Hop on that dick and that bitch, she gon' ride. Hop in that stolo, my nigga gon' slide. You ain't from that side, won't fuck with them guys. Up in that five, put that right to your eye. Yo. Trust $1, yeah. Wrong money, wrong money, wrong money. Yeah. All about a dollar, yeah. Hop in that coupe and my nigga gon' slide. Hop on that dick and that bitch, she gon' ride. Hop in that stolo, my nigga gon' slide. You ain't from that side, won't fuck with them guys. Up in that five, put that right to your eye. Hop in that coupe and my nigga gon' slide. Hop on that dick and that bitch, she gon' ride.
Like it's on the comeback. Mama's doing better, got an appetite back. I'll be sipping yak, sipping yak, sipping yak. Keep up with the times, days used to be long. Studio recording the same song. I'll be sipping yak, sipping yak, sipping yak. Got me out of character, girl, you're powerful. Feeling things that I never felt before. I'll be sipping yak, sipping yak, sipping yak.
Yeah, yeah, you know me. Dre be low key. Got yak on me, got pack on me. Spark the street, please. Your life's a blessing. Live, learn lessons. Pain and affection. Sip when we happy, sip when we stressing. Mind's in detention. Stuck with this, blunt with this, loving this. Life will flip up, down. Times this bottle make you smile. Times this bottle make you frown. My ace came home from a bid. Whole hood came out with them bottles. Time be flying, cause most of us haven't seen homies since high school. We pop these bottles, cause we celebrating. Flip side when I'm off this yak, better not bring confrontation. Flip side, I pop a bottle during conversation. Flip side, I sip this yak just for some toleration. Shit I be facing, shit I be seeing, knowing the facts. I cannot hide from the truth, there ain't no options for that. And I be knowing I got bills to pay, but I'm behind my way to cope with. It's the sip away, these thoughts all on my mind. Sip and hit the pussy, make my dick pressure her spine. Ran into some money, now my bank looking alright. We sip yak cause we fly. I overthink when I'm alone, may sip and cry. Sometimes this liquor be having me speak my mind. I'm in my feelings, wondering if my cousin's fine. Hope she's alright.
Money look like it's on the comeback. Mama's doing better, got an appetite back. I'll be sipping yak, sipping yak, sipping yak. Keep up with the times, days used to be long. Studio recording the same song. I'll be sipping yak, sipping yak, sipping yak. Got me out of character, girl, you're powerful. Feeling things that I never felt before. I'll be sipping yak, sipping yak, sipping yak.
Surgery after surgery, the same old thing. Hospital visits, doctors, and them same IVs. Cousin, I know you suffer from this vicious disease. Pain in the aches enough to leave you weak in your knees. Trust me, it hurts to think of close ones. Time's ticking, keep them in good spirits. Let them know that you with them. Every day I be wishing that I had all the answers. Cures for all of these poisons, cures for all of these cancers. You know when blood cells have a hook on them, they say it trims your life expectancy. Your days are slim, but not my cousin, she's strong. I can't imagine my auntie watching her child suffer. Look through the eyes of these fathers, look through the lens of these mothers. Enough to let that yak trip, feel these emotions and gravitate towards the sadness. But yo, my cousin is strong. We gon' pour it up and keep moving on. You built to last, ain't going nowhere. You gon' prove Dr. wrong. So trust me, family, ain't no need to cry. Let's try together and just keep our heads up to the sky. I drink and toast to that, cause lately I've been feeling foul. Chasing this Haney with crown, my liver's probably about to drown. I lost a brother-in-law, his father started a fund to honor his name. I never had the ill to ask him how he dealt with the pain. I wasn't there for the visits, I only saw all the smiles. It's hard to fathom with the vision of him losing his child.
Money look like it's on the comeback. Mama's doing better, got an appetite back. I'll be sipping yak, sipping yak, sipping yak. Keep up with the times, days used to be long. Studio recording the same song. I'll be sipping yak, sipping yak, sipping yak. Got me out of character, girl, you're powerful. Feeling things that I never felt before. I'll be sipping yak, sipping yak, sipping yak.
We built the last.
Started testing, but we hauled them all. Now they praying for a blessing like an altar call. The way we stay investing, we done bought them all. Our section steady flexing, we be off the wall.
I'ma make the kitty pop and the titty flop. Me go silly with a rock with a steady bop. Eco-friendly with the guap, get the fetty up. I throw a party at my spot, I don't need a yacht. Bring it to a city cop with a semi-glock. I'ma take it to the top, moving up a notch. Wanna walk inside my sock, better tell you not. Because I guarantee we not the same sneaker box. Easy rolling off aside, my Copa's collage. You can tell him me to reconcile with a good guy. Keep my followers in line like it's Vietnam. Ain't no telling anytime, it can be the bomb. Open up and let me slide right into your mind. That's the government on crime, I'ma leave it blind. Can't speak for all, saying we off the wall. I go to hoop on y'all in due time.
Excited, drop the flow when the beat drops. I go off. Get on the stage, I grab the mic and set the show off. Put your hands in the air, get prepared, I'm about to flame one. Put up the gloves and ring the bell, I swear feel bang on. Go ahead, clap for a queen. Feeling kinda popular, living the dream. Pop in the game like a dress for the scene. Cause I'm owning this name, homegrown in the jeans. Slow up the blow, pause, let me breathe. Said the movement, ask my team. Gotta go hard, Wu-Tang cause the cream. Can't pick a bed, I'm a new type of breed. Dope, say my name 3 times. You should prepare for the smoke. I put the beat in a choke hold. I'm not letting go, cause I want it. Pull up to the pool, what's good?
Women DMing and be on tilt. Do your body good, it be like milk. Grass up on the wall, it's beyond built. Keep it 100, we be like Will. Plaques up on the wall, it be on tilt. Stacks up on the wall, it be on stilts. I dress it like yay, it's all killed. You get it like yay, cause y'all killed this Philly just off the wall. 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 Off the wall.
Haters try to test me, so I shot them all. Now they in the underworld like a Pokeball. Show no mercy, had them pussy cats against the wall. Crack backs like backpacks, I'm going off of y'all. Gone for a minute, now I'm back in this. JFK rap activist. Make sure you tag me if you capture this. Kicks, watch how I master this. Now you know who the master is. Leave both in your mattresses. Flexing with my team is hazardous. Why you suckers really wanna clash with us? Cause this headshot, like the slingshot. Shouts the slingshot. Suckers backing down, but we not. Watch this fresh flow, spit out like Tide Pods in my mouth. JFK in Jersey in that house, and we wildin' out.
Ride around in my city, pockets like the guy Hickeys. Got a Glock tucked in my swishy. Tell a bitch drop and give me 50. It go wop, wop, they come and get me. Throw a shot back just like a frisbee. Rock a top hat like I'm Biggie. I advise you niggas don't diss me. And my side chick, she so frisky. Yeah, I know it's so risky. See notes around, it's so crispy. You come back around like 360. I'm short, black, and I'm chubby. And my hammer pants, you can't touch me. Got a bad hoe to handcuff me. Keep a knife with Crocodile Dundee.
Can't buy my love or loyalty, my soul is overpriced. Life be like B, roll the dice when you bet on the shooter. You know he shots, keep saying he blaming, but only me mugging is spamming your Grammy about that emoji life. But get him in person, I better reverse of that negative person's a poltergeist. Quoted in a winter soldier with no coat when he been in the trench. Like a mama busted open for the coach and then her son is still sitting the bench. That's dry bones and the level that I'm on. You can't track with an iPhone, not a rock star. I'm a fly drone, a loud walk bar, leave your mind blown. Bouncing off the water, spot to be jumping no sky zone. This man boasts Thanos rapping, universe is snapping to the infinity time stone. Not to consume a doom and gloom, your crew buffoons, your goony goons are looney tunes. Boom boom and spoon and fruity loons, your fancy pants, your mans be pansy bloom and June. So many bloody moves on Zoom, run on a few, jumping into the booze. Other dudes with another excuse, hitting people up with the news. Got a couple of views, bumping the bruise. I refuse, I got something to prove. I'm gonna use and abuse, and the drama ensues. Out of the odds and the ooze, shoes that I'm not gonna lose. Rockin', I got it poppin' and hopping and flagging the pew, dropping the clues, bombs. I promise we want it with you. Haters started testing, but we hauled them all. Now they praying for a blessing like an altar call. The way we stay investing, we done bought them all. Our section steady flexing, we be off the wall. Women yamming and be on tilt. Do your body good, it be like milk. Grass up on the wall, it's beyond built. Keep it 100, we be like Will. Plaques up on the wall, it be on tilt. Stacks up on the wall, it be on stills. Address it like, yeah, it's all killed. You get it like, yeah, cause y'all killed this Philly just off the wall. 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 Off the wall.
Shorty wanna ride my way. I'm lit. Shorty wanna ride my way. Oh shit. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. Shorty wanna ride my way. I'm lit. Shorty wanna ride my way. Oh shit. Shorty wanna ride my way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. My way. Shorty wanna ride my way. Shorty wanna ride my wave. No, shorty gon' ride that dick. Yeah, I was just stunting on the gram. Yeah, let me Snapchat that shit. Whoa, niggas be hating a lot. Ounce of codeine and I stay on the block. Bag me a bitch and I stay in the cut. I pull up with that thing, see me whipping the drop. 357, replay with that Glock. Calling this jacket, she fucking or not. Notice the wave and she all on my dick, but you gotta be bad, we don't fuck with no thoughts. Riding my wave, I'm just trying to get paid. All in the club and I'm on that Douce. Got that shit lit, start hitting my wave. Got that shit lit, start hitting my wave. Whoa, shorty wanna ride my wave. I'm lit. Shorty wanna ride my wave. Oh shit. Shorty wanna ride my wave. My way. Shorty wanna ride my wave. My way. Shorty wanna ride my wave. My way. Shorty wanna ride my wave. Up in the club, we about to get lit. Bottles on deck and we blowing that piff. Hundred some I don't see one I'ma get. I got the drip out the walk in this bitch. Whoa, I just pulled up in the Jag. Straight off the line, had to go in my bag. Chasing these checks and I'm ducking these bitches. I'm all on the jet and I'm getting that lag. Whoa, is it the flick of the wrist? No, look at this shit on my wrist. Oh, all of these diamonds, they shining. Can't even see what is the time on this bitch. Whoa, I'm in the club with the strap. Looking for me, but you know where I'm at. Niggas don't lean, I ain't fucking with that. I got the juice, I ain't giving
a club B, when I'm in the club G, though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy, or be at the bar with too much bubbly? Don't never drug B, when I'm in the club G, though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy, or be at the bar with too much bubbly?
I play the club scene, burning down gasoline. Couple liquor, taking shots of full magazine. Money ain't a thing, I got a lot of that. Pour your queen a drink, now she wanna chat. Hopping in my lap, trying to shoot a shot. Claim she wanna get low and turn it up a notch. Got me touching on the box like a pap smear. Haters looking at me mad, practically in tears. Lord, we in here, no doubt about it. I'm in my own world, but the club crowded. Feet kicked up, flirting with the barmaid. She took my secret tip and told me that her bills paid. Send the DJ a list of my favorite songs. Heat gas, got him sipping Dom Perignon. Keep calm, smell the loot on the premises. On point, all safety for my nemesis.
Don't never drug me when I'm in the club G, though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy, or be at the bar with too much bubbly? Don't never drug me when I'm in the club G, though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy, or be at the bar with too much bubbly?
Yo, my shooter move like Sean back in 01. Ain't nobody stopping us from having fun. By the bar, that's regular, we made it, law. Slick Rick, Mr. T, yo, my neck's off. Get my flex on, bodybuilding competition. From the Southboard, I put the brick in Brick City. Dark shades on, living in the spotlight. They on their day jobs, talking about my nightlife. We not the same type, one night your main squeeze. Pimp like Pimp C, but living like a bum B. Club scene, a crime scene, if anything pop off. Soldiers at attention, ready like a roll call. Last call for alcohol, law gets served first. I got your favorite stripper, glad that she came to work. All this thirst got me handing out Gatorade. Crystal for the chase, I call it lemonade.
Don't never drug me when I'm in the club G, though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy, or be at the bar with too much bubbly? Don't never drug me when I'm in the club G, though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy, or be at the bar with too much bubbly?
IDGAF when they play this song. Sing along, kush along. Make your missus ass but kinda string you on. Fucking final, all these niggas, they just throw a name on strong. Just that dizzy dope, that fizzy flow, like who you gaming on? I done been around like Equator, shit got deep like voice on Darth Vader. Tryna make a wish as a star, spoil everything I wanted since Sega. Saga started, I got retarded on every ball and shot plastic coasters. But my young boy had the white back against the wall like them taxi posters. Now I just recorded on a program, in a mix like a slow jam. jam. Got a nigga bopping like a toe jam. Hope you feel about that really slow dance. Think I'm Romeo, she tryna roll, man. See your hand ain't what I'm tryna hold, man. This ain't halftime, I don't show bands, and you know, man. I don't give a fuck. When it comes down to the bullshit they airing, we don't want no more. When it comes down to it, with the ones they can't pay, can't lie, cause they know. We lie, we lit, we so gone and they can't take no more. IDGAF, that's the stage left, that's when they play the song. When it comes down to the bullshit they airing, we don't want no more. When it comes down to it, with the ones they can't pay, can't lie, cause they know. We lie, we lit, we so gone and they can't take no more. IDGAF, that's the stage left, that's when they play the song.
I'm live in the kitchen, whipping the work, pitching to eat. Wrist automatic, I rock 'em to sleep. It's fooded below in these streets, cold in the cooler. Icy medulla, Ricky the ruler, I'm slick. Brain in the whip, quizzing your bitch, you gon' dummy on dick. Retarded as shit, tsunami, I'm lit. Wavy, I'm wavy, jocking the drip. Glock on me kick, 808 boom in your thinker. Empty the clip, speed through the city. Lego the click, snapping, connecting the dots. Atomically bombing the spot. Hotter than lava, higher dimension, a boy in your privilege. Nice with the vision, the rhyme and spit in the seat. Astrology over your head, I'm doper than opium mans, reviving the dead. Heard you was sick, yeah, take a fix of the boy. I'm banging the 10, say hello to my friend. Act like you wanna get shank with a pen. Look at them choke, I ain't giving a fuck. We tryna get paid and love with the guap. Give me the rollie and Mike is shit.
When it comes down to the bullshit they airing, we don't want no more. When it comes down to it, we the ones they can't pay, can't lie, cause they know. We lie, we lit, we so gone and they can't take no more. IDGAF, that's the stage left, that's when they play the song. When it comes down to the bullshit they airing, we don't want no more. When it comes down to it, we the ones they can't pay, can't lie, cause they know. We lie, we lit, we so gone and they can't take no more. IDGAF, that's the stage left, that's when they play the song.
I'm outside right now. I'm actually on the block. On my ass. About to spit a freestyle here. I'm out here. Yeah. This shit crazy how you can do this shit. Yeah. If I had this shit back in the day when I was on my time, this shit be crazy, man. I'm out here.
Underworld ENT coming to you.
I'm out here. I'm out here. I'm out here. I'm out here. Another time I'm out here. Gotta drop another rhyme, I'm out here. Yo, it's about the nick of time, I'm out here. Your niggas down and out there, I'm out here. Your niggas know I'm back in the place, y'all. Your niggas about to catch it to your face, y'all. Your niggas getting hit with the face, y'all. Your niggas got the fifth, well I'm out here. You wanna come and get, well I'm out here. Old styles and you know this niggas out here.
Yo man, we tuning in. Underwater official, underwater radio station, underwater movement. It's underwater everything. Yeah!
I'm out here. I'm out here. I'm out here. Your niggas talking heavy shit, I'm out here. Your niggas really wanna get them out here. You really talking real shit, I'm out here. Got the motherfucking cat.
In this lane, gotta put respect on this name.
Salute that.
I don't know, shit get blamed. Why you let your man get you up to get flame? Gotta put him back in his lane. Gotta put respect on this name.
Salute that.
I don't know, shit get blamed. Why you let your man get you up to get flame?
Yeah, Holmes, good look for when you played my song. If fake beef was the plan, I think you played it wrong. You could've told me in advance, I would've played along. But y'all playing games, now you won't play for long. But we could play it up, look how you played yourself. You let your man play you out, trying to find God. Could've taken a safer route, dumping out homes like it's my paper route. Now you nothing but garbage I'm taking out.
I just lay low, don't need stress. I exterminate these pests. Now you rockin' with the best odds. Yeah, so why would I need less?
Salute that.
I just lay low, don't need stress. I exterminate these pests. Now you rockin' with the best odds. Yeah, so why would I need less?
All these life lessons expressing little confessions. Dispel a legion of warring angels and ill connection. Praying he needs Jesus' protection. Lord, please forgive these praying hands. You're about to catch them like the Holy Ghost, slinging hands, slain in the spirit, and about to stretch them like Smith and Wesson. How you say you a blessing when you don't even know the Lord? Rowing the same boat, you went overboard. Let's song over? I'm bored. I hold the sword from a cold war over your head. Then swing it right at your neck to slit the vocal cord. You bugging out. This is a misstep when it comes to cloud. Rainmaker flow, don't stop. Just keep flooding out. Here we go. Fear the flow. Playing stereo. What you trying to do on radio now? I did years ago. Come for me, you must be under spell. Suicide's up in Connecticut. Guess that's why you're like, what the hell?
Gotta put him back in his name. Better put respect on his name.
Salute that.
I don't know who should get blamed, but why you let the man got you up to get flamed?
If you asked, I could've showed you how you supposed to host a show and go you listen. It's now a school you and scold you and hold your hand at the floor just to wake you for saying nobody knows me. But you're the nobody that knows me because of that promoter. Yet you know the only reason that I know you, that promoter chose you as the bait to take your body and soul. Like you need a baker or smoker. You animal, I'm a poacher. Salam alaikum, you salami bacon, I'm vulture. Before you consume the culture, I tip the cup coaster. Boot you out the game, you'll never come closer. That promoter told me to expose you as opposed to nobody been buying what you selling. Call me, I'm a close. You don't wanna start this, but I spark and park this. Murder you verbally, then defecating your carcass. Incredible, that was terrible. I'm hysterical. Better go back to your day job doing clerical, making schedules. Out of every 5, I'm a star. You just general. Salute the new commander in chief. Offense federal. Hire me to rewrite your verse. It wasn't legible. Blessed are the meek. I delete and get them the pedestal.
I just lay low, don't need stress. I experiment in these best. Now you rockin' with the best odds. Yeah, so why would I be less? I just lay low, don't need stress. I experiment in these best. Now you rockin' with the best odds. Yeah, so why would I be less? If I'm in trust somebody, it's time I've been hurt before. Yeah, I done been hurt before. If I'm in to trust somebody, I done been to trust somebody, cause I done been hurt before. I don't really trust nobody, cause I done been hurt before. Offer me to trust somebody, cause I done been hurt before. I don't really trust nobody, cause I done been hurt before. I don't really trust nobody, cause I done been hurt before. Offer me to trust somebody, cause I done been hurt before. I don't really trust nobody, cause I done been hurt before. Offer me to trust somebody, cause I done been hurt before. And you can't ball if you done stay down with the team. And you can't come around if you didn't put in on this dream. Man, I done stay down and I done put in on my dreams. I done invested in every damn thing. I done had faith when niggas lost faith. I done turned my niggas into kings. I done stayed down for the come up. We done bought, now we need our rings. Why these niggas looking like that? We ain't did a goddamn thing. We been hustling since kids, and now we need our money. Why we grinding so hard? Like a nigga got 20 kids. Why we grinding so hard? Cause them 20 cars in the yard. Why we getting it? Why we hustling? Cause a nigga never had nothing. When I look at my mama, I gotta keep on hustling. Mama, I know a nigga was bad, but I gotta keep on grinding. They can't stop my shine. I gotta keep on shining. Through the downs and ups, I gotta keep on hustling. When I was fucked up, a nigga ain't give me nothing. Offer me to trust somebody, cause I done been hurt before. I don't really trust nobody, cause I done been hurt before. Offer me to trust somebody, cause I done been hurt before. I don't really trust nobody, cause I done been hurt before. I don't really trust nobody, cause I done been hurt before. Offer me to trust somebody, cause I done been hurt before. I don't really trust nobody, cause I done been hurt before. Offer me to trust somebody, cause I done been hurt before.
Air range like Mike Jordan, she faded away like Mike Jordan. Love is the most deadliest weapon if she with the bullshit like Mike Jordan. One thing about love is when it hits you feel no pain. It's when it leaves you feel the pain. Moving on is kinda hard though.
can't trust no one cause my heart's so still played somehow. I want more. Check the scoreboard, man, I lost score. Man, I lost score. Reckless swerving, hope I die slower. Hope I die slower. Reckless swerving, hope I die slow. Niggas wormed on me, them bitches too. Said I ain't care, but I really do. Hit the gas so it keep me super shoe. Put my trust in myself so I won't lose. Every heart get you mixing drugs, my nigga. My system come without control of my nigga. Fool me one time, shame on you. Fool me twice, hope it rains on you. Bury my heart with cement this time. I admit it make me cry sometimes. I got me, I'm on my grind this time. Hard for me to trust a dime this time. Bury my heart with cement this time. I admit it make me cry sometimes. I got me, I'm on my grind this time. Hard for me to trust a dime this time.
Offer me to trust somebody, cause I done been hurt before. I don't really trust nobody, cause I done been hurt before. Offer me to trust somebody, cause I done been hurt before. I don't really trust nobody, cause I done been hurt before. I don't really trust nobody, cause I done been hurt before. Offer me to trust somebody, cause I done been hurt before. I don't really trust nobody, cause I done been hurt before. Offer me to trust somebody, cause I done been hurt before.
The new age of hip hop.
Download all Underworld Radio mix CDs. DJ JFK presents at undergroundentertainment.bandcamp.com. That's undergroundentertainment.bandcamp.com. Or you could go to www.underworld.com. Download all our mix CDs and DVDs, merchandise, and whatever. Support the movement, which is Underworld.
Yeah, they try to survive and try to make it home. Tell me why they had to die. Cause they didn't make it home. Let's go.
Didn't have to die that way. Like a movie night turned dark night to a real deadly night.
Yo, this rhyme for my man J-Von. Cried over Trayvon. Survive Columbine. I put his story in the scribe. Love life, to live life. Life is all you have. Yes. Reach out and take a grab. For these haters take a stab in the barrel with the crabs. Can't get out like my man J-Von stressed out. Moms kicked him out till he got a real job. He used to smoke crack, still and rob. On his knees he would pray inside the God that he stopped. Month later got a job at a pizza shop. Called the scrub cause he pushed the mop. Didn't make a lot, felt like he was on a rise to the top. Can't stop a grown ass man. It's payday, cash in hand. Took his son to see the new Batman. Did I forget he's a Coloradian? I think you know how the story ends. Make my head spin. Why do we die before life begins? When we transcend, we family and friends. That's why I follow God and not trends. Don't break a bend when I die and my soul leaves my skin. Like,
I mean, why they had to die? Cause they didn't make it home. Now their families cry. Cause they didn't make it home. Yeah, they tried to survive and tried to make it home. Tell me why they had to die. Cause they didn't make it home.
Didn't have to die that way. Why do the young and the restless hurt others young and defenseless?
16 years, avoiding the pressure from his peers. Just smoking, guzzle some beers. Partying a wild sex, hanging out with wild sex. Avoiding fights by treating bullies as if they're idle threats. Doing night, he got a knock upon his window pane. A boy that introduced him to a girl by the name of Mary Jane. Figuring he was a cool cat, her curiosity couldn't kill. He carelessly caved in and then consciously changed and killed his will to survive, dying to stay alive. Searching for the lows in his life just to get high. Though he's not an addict and smoking became a habit, out of sight, out of mind. But when he saw that he had to grab it, till one day it got tragic and took a different angle. He was given the blunt with the dust of a little angel. It's already sad because the little homie OD. But what makes it bad is that this blunt was from his cold D.
Didn't have to die that way. In the fast lane chasing highs, life racing by, better get away.
Running things and he fell crippled in a joint like a cell sickle. Holy water in a well ripple. May have helped that lane. What good was money, power, respect when he didn't have life, health, and strength? Off white room strapped to his body withering. Thoughts of how he used to get it in maroons and cinnamon. And even boosting women, boosting him with juice and gin and a loosen the genocidal sin and he was living in. Preaching Jesus, then he asked if he forgive him and if he could get him in when the time was up to live again. apology accepted. But the God family stone, the game slime, it's the long quality time gotta be collected. And the flash time rewinds back through the lifetime line, then the line's flat. Carried out as life preferences, trying to find hope in these killer verses filled with life sentences.
I mean, why they had to die? Cause they didn't make it home. Now their families cry, cause they didn't make it home. Yeah, they tried to survive and tried to make it home. Tell me why they had to die, cause they didn't make it home.
Stress to relieve their pain, but they go a lot quicker than they originally came. Pour out a little liquor for my brothers and my sisters that's gone. They may be gone from the earth, but your soul lives on. As for the rest of the fam, we miss you undone. And we know Jarrell and Aunt Marguerite is up there carrying on. But we stay strong for what it was worth. Grandma got her weekdays, Sundays at church. Losing you was worse than a chop to the throat. You taught me success and to never lose hope. You inspired people with the things that you spoke. Your life is like a movie that's supposed to be wrote. You know pop breaking rules that ain't supposed to be broke. You know I've been through pain and my heart's been broken, but my family keep me from things that hurt. I look to the sky and I look for the star that's yours, and then I close my eyes and smirk and sing.
They didn't have to die that way. No make sense is trying to make sense of something that's senseless.
I mean, why they had to die? Cause they didn't make it home. Now their families cry, cause they didn't make it home. Yeah, they tried to survive and tried to make it home. Tell me why they had to die, cause they didn't make it.
Come as a bitch, 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 and revenge is the motherfucker that I fuck with. Come as a bitch, and revenge is the motherfucker that I fuck with. Come as a bitch, 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 and revenge is the motherfucker that I fuck with. Come as a bitch, and revenge is the motherfucker that I fuck with.
You know how that cone be working, stay in your lane, you be swerving. What have you heard? And how you put behind the curtain, bullets cut through you like surgeons. Put your pictures by the candles, lay you in pieces, dismantle. Clicking buttons on the chopper, like we flip it through the channels. Run up and you can get canceled. Pussycat niggas throw tantrums, then I sit down with commander, like on the sandals. My nigga, we paid it for, have you heard of for ransom? Y'all clowns that be trusting these hoes, like why y'all be cuffing these hoes. But crazy thing is, most these niggas really be hoes, just up in men clothes. Y'all see the way, new way be stunning. We hit hard like that bass when it's thumping. When we pull up to your spot, you know it's us, cause your squad gon' be running. That we playing a song. Flying holler sister, they gon' be ducking from Dallas, Texas, so you know we ain't bluffing. We wildlife niggas, so you know that we bucket.
Come as a bitch, 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 and revenge is the motherfucker that I fuck with. Come as a bitch, and revenge is the motherfucker that I fuck with. Come as a bitch, 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 and revenge is the motherfucker that I fuck with. Come as a bitch, and revenge is the motherfucker that I fuck with.
Come as a bitch, Molly say lit, come as so trash. Molly spreads you with all of that cash. Hey niggas, get hit with that pass. Taking niggas feelings for a night, now smash. False on them niggas, you know that's coming. Papa niggas, now that crap for they mama. And that's Texas rockin' all that designer. Females go digger, so I'm not gonna sign them. Yeah, they say I am so cocky. Ice on my wrist, looking rocky. Hating niggas can't stop me. Molly, you know what I'm with it. Any nigga hate can get it. Molly stay lit in the bed. Got a lot of cash, don't need to hit legs. Female shoes, so they take a tape hit. Next window, yeah, we break up them sticks. We break up them sticks. So nigga grannies, he showing me tricks. I'm money liquor, but he selling them chicks. Molly still lit on so nice. Look at my wrist, neck flooded with ice. Come as a bitch, so much roll the dice. Molly, 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 Molly.
Come as a bitch, 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 and revenge is the motherfucker that I fuck with. Come as a bitch, and revenge is the motherfucker that I fuck with. Come as a bitch, come as a bitch, come as a bitch.
Into Underworld Radio with Old Styles and the Underworld team. We playing a lot of indie artists tonight. We going in. We're gonna have request lines open in a minute. Make sure y'all call in. We're going in heavy right now. Let's go.
I be making moves, I be running round. I be trapping out, I be trapping out. Let's get it. I
be making moves, I be running round. The heater. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Beat lines.
I be making moves, I be running rounds. I be doing the shit these rappers talk about. I be trapping out, I be trapping out. I be trapping out, I be trapping out. I be making moves, I be running rounds. I be doing the shit these rappers talk about. I be trapping out, I be trapping out. I be trapping out, I be trapping out. Bands in my Gucci bag and a sun pass. I hog up the road like a goddamn avalanche. My trap boom dimes, clear 10 bands. I trap like 10 man. I'm plugged in with Popeye's chicken. I be making moves, swear to God, I be guapping. Chicken wing dinner gone soon as I drop it. Money in the power, Tony Montana shit. 5 grand plate, that's a fucking power link. My trap stay open. All I do is power stick. All I do is whip it up, run around and jug a bitch. Pockets on dumb, stupid, swole off a jug and shit. So work, risk game. All I do is pull tricks. I be making moves, I be running routes. I be doing the shit these rappers talk about. I be trapping out, I be trapping out. I be trapping out, I be trapping out. I be making moves, I be running routes. I be doing the shit these rappers talk about. I be trapping out, I be trapping out. I be trapping out, I be trapping out.
I be trapping out, I be running routes. I be having bricks even when it's drought. Ballin' in my city, yeah, I'm cashing out. Maserati ticket cost 100,000. I got mob time, coast to Nostra. Speak a little Spanish, I can get it over. 1 call, 2 votes, filled up with Yoda. Bust it out the tube, you can smell the odor. Trap doing numbers, all we move is scrollers. Brand new hundreds, got my pockets running over. I be running routes, I'm a road runner. Trapping out, all we know is doing numbers.
I be making moves, I be running routes. I be doing the shit these rappers talk about. I be trapping out, I be trapping out. I be trapping out, I be trapping out. I be making moves, I be running routes. I be doing the shit these rappers talk about. I be trapping out, I be trapping out. I be trapping out, I be trapping out.
Never work. You was my one true lover, my friend. I may never love. I can't imagine my life without him. I need him, I love him. I've been hurt for so long. Sacrificed my whole life until I'm what's my behavior? And you appear like magic. Was also tragic until I found my magic. I can't imagine life without my magic. Shit was tragic until I found my magic.
I was searching for love, but love is unconditional. She felt some type of way when I mentioned you, but she was wrong. She be drawn. Now she calling my phone saying I'm missing you. Searching for love, now I found you, and you do the things that I like to do. We go out to eat, go to the movies, go to the telly, drinking wine all up in the jacuzzi, being with her. We ain't do none of that. All she wanted was sex and all my doom stacks. Being with you, you make me feel alive. You push me hard to be that perfect guy. Being with her, relationship was dead. And every damn day, unhappiness. Being with you, you hold me down. I was searching for love. Now love is what I found.
What's my behavior? And you appear like magic. Was also tragic until I found my magic. I can't imagine life without my magic. Shit was tragic until I found my magic. I found my love.
riding from wet machete flow. Michael Myers breath, ride dirty but fresh. Above 30, they call me Sire Superior. MacGyver on the journey, hit me in high and nobody scared of ya. Ride solo, I'm Tony, no Manolo. On the run, please no photo, smoking gun. Hate me that mofos, chip on my shoulder. Loyal soldier, God color me mocha. Life is a malfunctioning roller coaster, no amusement. I'm like Lucian from Underworld, plotting on a full moon. I feel funny rocking the fur, slave jeans in my DNA. Super live, I deserve a VMA for this rap alkaline. Keep the faith, trade places with them, no way. All my liquor straight, big faces say I'm doing better than okay. I ain't stressing, I was never for second guessing. Cause I'm the crocodile with the smile beneath the crescent and I'm shitting. This taller is out of order. Hearing voices saying commit a violent slaughter. This is my aura, Sodom and Gomorrah. Take a news reporter hostage, charge him with spreading false gossip. Sully is toxic, tell her op stop it, I got it, I won't drop it. Acknowledge it whether you pray to Jesus or Muhammad.
Team, we everything we say we are. Team, we everything we say we are. Pocket batter, cookie grabber, stomp outer, talk walker, New Yorker, bounce bouncers. Team, we everything we say we are. Team, we everything we say we are.
Sharpen my focus, bars are the dopest. Any subpar rapper, we make him go fish. Notice my shark features, I don't swim with the bottom feeders. Top of the food chain, Sully, feed on the non-believers. Critics being so facetious like my shit is peaches. I've been poisonous, the leeches told us how I keep it. Dangerous, militant, moving strategic. Third eye, watching my back for security breaches. Evil streets out in Queens where the mark of the beaches. Fiends with shattered dreams trying to put together pieces. Blocks burnt out, rigor mortis up on the corner. And might spread, night of the living dead stalkers. Married the street, took the chopper to the altar. But she don't never gossip, she just knocked the topping off your hot.
Team, we everything we say we are. Team, we everything we say we are. Pocket batter, cookie grabber, stomp outer, talk walker, New Yorker, bounce bouncers. Team, we everything we say we are. Team, we everything we say we are.
I'd rather die for what's right than live on my knees, and I ain't taking the mark of the beast. Woo, hey yo, it's spiritual warfare, and I ain't scared, cause I'm prepared to leave a sucker impaired. Yeah, Chief Birdsong and Thundermaker. Let's get it. Yo, I make mistakes and then I fix them. Approach with caution, I will fight off your issues. I may cause tears, but I don't provide tissue. If you come at self-liquidity, then self will dismiss you. No bullets, blades, and vernacular missiles. Catch as I toss blows, did it shift your bone bristle? You must equate rock to challenge my stature. I'm really down for the cause and I don't click with actors. No perfection, but I'm chasing it. My past, I cherish my life, so I'm changing it. No more girl problems, I'm not in the pride. Focused on being in the family, man, now. Yeah, I'm about this paper in the brain between your tapers. Not interested in your envy, I'm the downfall of you haters. So fall back and get your soul crisp. Lyrically, I'm a hurtin' for suckers that rock curtains. Fugazis. Yeah. I'd rather die for what's right than live on my knees. And I ain't taking the mark of the beast, sucker. Woo. Then live on my knees, and I ain't taking the mark of the beast, sucker. Woo.
UWR priority artist.
Where's my 40? My 40 acres in my mule. See, I'm trying to keep my cool. They done played us for a fool. Where's my 40? After all you put us through, when the evil is you do, we just trying to live like you. So where's my 40? My 40, where's my 40? My 40. 40? Where's my 40? My 40 acres and my mule. See, they play me for a fool, so I'm about to lose my cool. Where's my 40? I win all the issue promised me. See, 40 acres is land, I want my property. We can build together, don't gotta be a monopoly. I just wanna live my life without you stopping me. Only got one life to live, I gotta make it. So if you ain't got it to give, I gotta take it. My rent and these bills is real, I can't fake it. And the IRS be on my ass, and I can't shake it. Yeah. I guess you thought it was cool, cause some graduated from school and got a house with a pool, a watch, bracelet, and necklace that's all covered in jewels. But only the ignorant niggas was fooled. I ain't trying to stunt, I'm trying to move from the back to the front and be equal so all my people can be what they want. Don't take this next statement as a threat or a front, but to be blunt, we better get what we want, motherfucker. So where's my 40? My 40 acres and my mule. See, I'm trying to keep my cool, but they done played us for a fool. So where's my 40? After all you put us through and the evil is you do, we just trying to live like you. So where's my 40? My 40. Where's my 40? Where's my 40? My 40. Where's my 40? Where's my 40? My 40 acres and my mule. See, they play me for a fool, so I'm about to lose my cool. Where's my 40? Cause I know you don't think repaying us was giving us our so-called freedom like you were saving us. The slave masters became cops and they're still slaying us. All because we're misunderstood and they're afraid of us. So you betrayed our trust talking about you saving me. Protect and serve? Nah, it's more like modern day slavery. You send us to the cage of the grave and it ain't savory. America, home of the brave, showing their bravery. Yeah, so we really ain't get a thing. And please don't say you gave us the sport to the music game. Cause along with that came the dope, pills and cocaine, and the most addicted drug of them all, better known as fame. So, to make a long story short, your debts ain't repaid, cause you gave us a ball in the court. New whips and chains, some dames, and a few new drugs to snort. Cause in the end, you still coming up short. Motherfuckers, I want my 40. My 40 acres in my mule. See, I'm trying to keep my cool, but they done played us for a fool. Where's my 40? After all you put us through and the evil is you do, we just trying to live like you. So where's my 40? My 40. Where's my 40? Where's my 40? My 40, where's my 40, where's my 40? My 40 acres and my mule. See, they play me for a fool, so I'm about to lose my cool. Where's my 40? Yo, where's my 40? Who got my 40? Where's my 40? Who took my 40? Where's my for real, you got my 40? Hey, yo, Phil, you see my 40? Where's my 40? Give me another OD, man.
Can of fire, middle of winter, lifted it from the ground and wiped the dirt from my reflection. I was noticing it's transparent like my past is present. Now can you picture this picture without a frame or a filter? Counting likes from the likes of those. Let me know when you strike a pose. Put a multitask in your phone that controls every moment. No, you make a move. We are pawns on the checkerboard. I see through like a clairvoyant through a portal or a call of my endurance. I've endured it, all the pain and all the strain, all the same. It's all a game. Got us on the ball and chain. Wonder why we brought for change. I see through like a pair of bifocals on Benjamin. Band a cup for Benjamins. Telescope on deck. I can see the space that I deserve to begin. This journey, boy. Who'd ever thought it was a Jersey boy? Cause I got the feeling that I ain't beginning to fit into where I fit into what's real. Do you know that? Nigga. Feel it. What's real? Let me show you. Yeah. Answer me that, what's real? Yeah, what's real? Let me show you. $100 million, $100 million, all I wanted. $100 million, $100 million, all I ever wanted. $100 million, $100 million, all I ever wanted. All I wanted, every minute, yeah, I wanted. All I ever wanted, $100 million, every minute. Hey, every day, money, road run, big cars, big
highway, get paid. Yeah, millions, roll run, big cars, big guns. My way, highway, get paid every day. Millions, roll run, big cars, big guns. My way, highway, get paid every day. Millions, roll run, big cars, big guns. Money, all we know to get paid. Take trips every day on the highway. On the highway, every day we getting paid. Interstate 95, that be my way. In the hood, when I touch down, it's okay. Trap house doing numbers, serving 4 ways. Big guns at the spot, so we feel safe. Make the moan move, nigga, then it's gunplay. Gunplay around my way like every day. Niggas play cockroaches, then they getting sprayed. Tony Montana lifestyle, we okay. Big guns, big money, nigga, I'm self-made. My way, highway, get paid every day. Millions, road run, big cars, big guns. My way, highway, get paid every day. Millions, road run, big cars, big guns. My way, highway, get paid every day. Millions, road run, big cars, big guns. My way, highway, get paid every day. Millions, road run, big cars, big guns. Niggas know I'm ballin', boy, I'm talking high stakes. Got enough of dope to feed my whole team a plate. Been a boss man, all I do is elevate. Drop the Bentley Spur, now they finna play a hate. Been had hundreds way before the big face. Road run all summer on the highway. Trap doing numbers every day of payday. Duffel bag full of millions, we getting paid. Big guns at the spot, don't make us spray. Tied in with the mob, so we self-made. The type of niggas gotta always get the cake. Money, that be my way. My way, highway, get paid every day. Millions, road run, big cars, big guns. My way, highway, get paid every day. Millions, road run, big cars, big guns. My way, highway, get paid every day. Millions, road run, big cars, big guns. My way, highway, get paid every day. Millions, road run, big cars. I know they can see me, I'm ghost. I know they can see me, I'm ghost. My bitch get the pop with your big, and we get the pop Billy Ghost. Whoa. I know they can see me, I'm ghost. 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 My bitch get the pop with your big, and we get the pop Billy Ghost. Whoa. I know they can see me, I'm ghost. I know they can see me, I'm ghost. I know they can see me, I'm ghost. Yeah. Get it? Nigga trying by the sauce now. Yo, this for you. I'm the man with it. Woo. Run through the yard, I'm a nigga full of BS. Fuck it up, get it back, nigga, that's a replay. I was teaching niggas fuck a reset. I was on the corner with the D-flag. I ain't for the BS. I'ma get my team right, PS. I'ma put the fame when I lost. These niggas bitch about they bro. I'm allowed to be dope. I remember Bollies and I coke. I had to get it. I know they can see me, I'm ghost. I know they can see me, I'm ghost. My bitch get the pop with your big, and we get the pop Billy Ghost. Whoa. I know they can see me, I'm ghost. 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 My bitch get the pop with your big, and we get the pop Billy Ghost. Whoa. I know they can see me, I'm ghost. I know they can see me, I'm ghost. I know they can see me, I'm ghost.
I know they can see me up ghost. I'm getting that bread at a loaf. I'm a lie to the judge of the oath. I'm that shit that you put in your nose. We them niggas bring us to a shows. I'm that nigga gun under his clothes. Red and blue pill. Nigga, I'm popping them both. I'ma empty this clip out that boat. I'll be outside your bushes like most. I'ma turn on the news for results. Black hoodies on like a coat. I'ma rip off her clothes like the Hulk. I'ma fare this shit, watch it joke. I'ma fuck on her friend while she walk. To tell that bitch it was my fault.
I know they can see me, I'm ghost. I know they can see me, I'm ghost. My bitch get the pop with your big, and we get the pop Billy Ghost. Whoa. I know they can see me, I'm ghost. 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 My bitch get the pop with your big, and we get the pop Billy Ghost. Whoa. I know they can see me, I'm ghost. I know they can see me, I'm ghost. I know they can see me, I'm ghost.
Top guns. Let me just show you how I fuck the trap up. Selling the dope, nigga, all the crack. Selling the coke, baby, other Zans. Baby girl, I can pull it on your mans. If I just fly right to the ends. No lights, need to know my diamonds dance. Yeah, I just trap out of phones all day and night. Young and running up these bands. Lifestyle should be on demand. Run every time these don't get a chance. Hitting my phone cause I got it low. Nigga got a trap, yeah, I gotta go. Street shit, oh, that a nigga know. Keep my heat in case I gotta blow. I ain't no killer nigga, but don't push me. Changing the game even as a rookie. Fucking your bitch, yeah, pussy gushy. Getting her more wetter than she should be. But I'm a trapaholic, calling me a menace. Fucking call it what you call it. Me in the hat, Liddy in the office. Big body Benz, couldn't even park it. Clothes that I wear, not up in the market. I box a stew, got a nigga coughing. But I'm a trapaholic. Nigga getting money, getting to these bands. I'm a trap regardless. RP Weber, free play guns. I'm a rap regardless. Every beat I'm gon' cook it up. Niggas knowin' I'm the hardest. Painting pictures like an artist. I'm a trapaholic. Nigga getting money, getting to these bands. I'm a trap regardless. RP Weber, free play guns. I'm a rap regardless. Every beat I'm gon' cook it up. Niggas knowin' I'm the hardest. Painting pictures like an artist. Talking about beef, you pussy niggas better pardon my way. Before a nigga get shot in the face, don't make me hit the fucking highway today. Bitch nigga, I'll ride on you niggas. Come outside, I'll slide on you niggas. Make your mama say goodbye to you niggas. Chopper flies in the hollow some niggas. Young nigga that just filled up with pain. Cut different, we ain't grow up the same. 14 in the basement with gang. Grinding hard so the life I could change. Want the money, I don't really do fame. Cross me once and I blow out your brain. Whole world about to know my damn name. Styling hard, about to cop me a chain. About to put mama right in the range. Until then, I'ma trap with the gang. Trap with the gang.
Listen, niggas never gave me shit. I scream fuck 'em. Try to play a low-key nigga, but never duck 'em. Talk behind your back to your face, they saying nothing. Here's your application, bitch niggas check on frontin'. Plus when you down, them fools they never round. But a wise man once said even the circus got clowns. So I'ma do what I do with the flow to the fresh, with the E to the nest, staying fresh to my death. Niggas love to see you down and out for the count. Hey, when a nigga go to 12 rounds, application denied. Friend to respond, my application is for murder. I see that you check die. You won't make it to the interview. Better yet, the sitting room. Stupid motherfucker, can't you see what I am getting to? Your act was trash. Your shit is played. Next time you fill it out, nigga, send a resume.
I got a haters application, you should fill it out. Once you apply, then you approve, you can chill it out. I grab a Pyrex pot and whip a skillet out. You withholding info, I make you spill it out. So many hoes caught the vapors on Judgment Day. And niggas try and count the money I got tucked away. If I pop another bottle, I need double leg. So I can give a rat's ass with a sucker says. You guilty by association, you should fill it out. Niggas shoot so many bricks, they could build a house. They should bury all informants, let the killers out. Legal and blind to write rhymes, you can fill it out. I'm with the Fresh Flow gang on 54th Street. I met him at the Cav gang, it was floor seats. The west side of Washington up the northeast. We turning all you corn bars into corn beef.
You need a hitter's application.
You should fill it out.
And custom fees and registration.
You should fill it out.
And when you want the real plays in the field, what's the deal? Got an expert in the bill.
You should fill it out.
You need some numbers for your show.
You should fill it out.
Your funds are coming kinda slow.
You should fill it out.
And for the thirsty heads who gon' turn their heads, you wanna know what the survey says.
You should fill it out.
Sneaker King on deck, move to being made connected with Ines. Car go down the highway. Exit 7-8, phone posit King, hologram how I play. Mr. Bacon on deck, doing it my way. Fresh with the flow, Gil Buster all day. Black entrepreneurs got the haters saute. Red carpet SK, that's how they walk May. Trenton in the building, Nev Day off May. Hustle hard, black bottle boys, epic movie. Black models at the W, bubble jacuzzi. Shining on these ducks, soft as a smoothie. Money getter since Bill Cosby wearing the Coogee. Whack niggas make me unruly. Nah, we ain't cool, you fake pops ain't raised no fool. I've been on my grind, destined to receive what's mine. 5 violate. If you cross that line, Christopher Reeve your spine. Smoking on that fine, straight island vine. Test me, you must be out of your mind. Make it hard for you day and nighttime.
You out of fresh hot Loch Ness?
Bring the dealers out.
Promo for the go-go to the ho-go.
You can feel it out.
You can't deny we the realest out when we chillin' out.
You need a permit for the flow.
You should fill it out.
I've been a student of the game, learned some lessons there. Wanna know my thoughts, dude? I've been filled out the questionnaire. Worked at MTV, BET.
How you getting there?
Putty tat haters get testy.
Couldn't get a pair.
Top floor of Hollywood stores, yeah, it's a mess in there. Fresh flow and that's no this game, it ain't never fair. Rappers running out of they life savings to come inside. Gotta add,
Fill it out right.
we are the ones denied. Sneak this or being wagon, now you wanna ride. Money wise, all funny guys, yoked up sunny side. Your funds are dry, you always asking for help with it. Can't check the man in the mirror using a selfie stick. I never doubt what you really bout in the interview. When in a drought, how you deal reveals the inner you. 360 deal is out, went the indie route, so fresh flow for hiring out.
You should fill it out.
You need a hater's application.
You should fill it out.
And cuffing season registration.
You should fill it out.
And when you want the real plays in the field, what's the deal? Got an expert in the field.
You should fill it out.
Give me some numbers for your show.
You should fill it out.
Your friends are coming kinda slow.
You should fill it out.
And for the thirsty heads, who gon' turn their heads? You wanna know what the survey says?
You should fill it out. You should fill it out.
Ever sober, yeah. I'm rarely ever sober, yeah. I swear I'm never sober, yeah. I'm hardly ever sober. Open up my hand with the best friend. Nasty with the pen. Tripping after 10. We got what you need, no. What you need, figured out what you need, no. What you need, I got what you need, no. What you need, gotta fix for all your needs, no. All your needs, yeah. Feel like I'm the motherfucking man. Damn, feel like I just caught another win. Damn. Came back and I'm here with this. Bitches throwing pussy like this shit again. This finna get ugly like a blind date. Yeah, my pocket's fat like a blind date. Y'all late, new to this shit, but I move like an old head. Call old girl so she can give me more head. Oh man, don't make a scene. Been shitting on these niggas so my bathroom's clean. I do not know her, Billie Jean. She came up short like a breeze. Jeans, these lames all trash, the breeze. Jeez, I made them all mad at his Philistine. I feel like it's permanent. I feel like I'm moving in. I feel like they're missing it. I feel like you can now make a difference. I feel like I am the man with the meanest chef. The man with the meanest chef. Yeah, barely ever sober. Yeah, I'm barely ever sober. Yeah, I swear I'm never sober. Yeah, I'm hardly ever sober. Open up my hand with the best friend. Nasty with the pen. Tripping after 10. We got what you need, no. What you need, figured out what you need, no. What you need, I got what you need, no. What you need, gotta fix for all your needs, no. All your needs, yeah. No time for that R&R, nah. Making all these moves, put my car in start. Flames in the booth like I'm Charizard. Had to sit back like a really bad glitch. They're trying to work it out, so I'm sore as shit. See you going down, it's the wrong way, nigga. Told your girl, come my way, nigga. She in good hands like Allstate, nigga. Always go hard, never hesitate. Bad bitches all gravitate. Know you seen better days. Swear you seen better days, but they all amazed and amazed. Trying to figure out what's in the mate and the maze. To your left, now look to your right. Something ain't right. Ooh. When you claim you the best, you better wear vest, cause soon they'll see it's true. Ooh. Feel like I conquered it. Feel like they can't get in. Feel like I'm in it, man. Feel like I made it, man. I feel like you can now make a difference. I feel like I am the man with the meanest chef. Man with the meanest chef. Yeah, barely ever sober. Yeah, I'm barely ever sober. Yeah, I swear I'm never sober. Yeah, I'm hardly ever sober. Open up my hand with the best friend. with the pen. Tripping after 10. We got what you need now. What you need, figure out what you need now. What you need, I got what you need now. What you need, gotta fix for all your needs now. All your needs.
I've been whipping, cooking, selling, dope, wow, running. I've been whipping, cooking, selling, dope, wow, running. Whipping, cooking, selling, dope, wow, running. Wow, running. Whip it, cook it, wow, running. I've been whipping, cooking, selling, dope, wow, running. I've been whipping, cooking, selling, dope, wow, running. Wow, running. Whip it, cook it, wow, running. Whip it, cooking, selling, dope, nigga, I've been wow, running. Trap, doing numbers, so I know my clout coming. Pussy nigga go to spill when the Draco come out, get the running. I'm a street nigga, bitch. I keep street nigga bricks. I'm at the trap doing numbers. My whole clique getting rich. All we know is count commas. Route running, making sticks. My sauce insane. Baby girl say that she love my flame. Boss man, ice man, soprano game. She cold, all red, everything. Catch me at the bando, serving up hella cane. Everybody know boss man, get it all in. I've been whipping, cooking, selling, dope, wow, running. I've been whipping, cooking, selling, dope, wow, running. Whipping, cooking, selling, dope, wow, running. Wow, running. Whip it, cook it, wow, running. I've been whipping, cooking, selling, dope, wow, running. I've been whipping, cooking, selling, dope, wow, running. Wow, running. Whip it, cook it, wow, running. Cooking, selling, dope, nigga, I've been wow, running.
Straight drop, got the city in the chokehold. Watch the bird fly straight out my dope hole. Bust a whole thing down in the traffic zone. Run routes with the work till the ground's gone. Keep banging that shit out the bando. Niggas know they gotta come to the back door. Shoes lined up at my back door. Nigga, I swing my trap door. Make it fall to the bottom of the glass bowl. Fish scale bricks come with a passport. Whipping up dope in my tongue force. Shug up shit I transport. Pull up for you, nigga, do a drop off. Pull up for you with the top off.
I've been whipping, cooking, selling, dope, wow, running. I've been whipping, cooking, selling, dope, wow, running. Whipping, cooking, selling, dope, wow, running. Wow, running. Whip it, cook it, wow, running. I've been whipping, cooking, selling, dope, wow, running. I've been whipping, cooking, selling, dope, wow, running. Wow, running. Whip it, cook it, wow, running. Whip it, cooking, selling, dope, nigga, I've been wow, running.
New World Radio, you live, you got on the air. Hey, what's up, Ma? How you been?
Still good looking ass nigga.
You crazy, man. You wild.
Stop poking up. I get caught all kind of shit with my goddamn ass. Bad boy style. I do. That's what
I know you do, yo.
what you do though. Besides the little
You know what I do. Stop playing, got no freaking out every time, man.
motherfucking me, dickhead.
Oh, you trash. Much love to Pocahontas for chilling with us. Let's go.
Sometimes you just gotta sit back, watch and listen, get a full understanding of things, you know? You didn't want me seeing brighter days, and only wanted me to lose my way. And all them jealous thoughts that you displayed, listen, I seen it coming from a mile away. Tried it on me, trapped me in your maze, but it was nothing for me to find my way. I was prepared for this since 20 days, nigga. I seen it coming from a mile away. Brightest day, I done read your mind, your thoughts. I saw the signs, this grimy motherfucker couldn't wait to catch a nigga blind. All of your intentions was to knock my hustle, pull the pistol on me, leave the scene with all my bundles. I seen it coming so vivid.
I seen it coming from a mile away. I seen it coming from a mile away.
I seen it coming from a mile away.
I seen it coming from a mile away. I seen it coming from a mile away.
From a mile away.
I seen it coming from a mile away. I seen it coming from a mile away.
In my soul, in my guts. Folk in your life, they don't care how they hurt you. Say you a dream, get it going to murk you. Doggy dog world, guessing ain't personal. Shit goes so left, ain't it reversible. Hold up, motherfuckers never wanted me to blow up. Saw it coming, they was prepping me for bad news. I was ready, prepared, and played it so smooth. You had no clue, holla back cool, then I'm back cool. Looking brand new, fresh on them. Somebody heard, somebody mad, huh? Thought I didn't know I was close to a downfall. Thought I wasn't taking it home with a grandpa. How long will this go on? Faking, prolong, acting like you got love for me, acting trying to get close to me, acting like you don't know.
I seen it coming from a mile away. 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 I seen it coming from a mile away.
Disrespect me, haters come to get me. Who gon' check me? 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 Trying to disrespect me, haters come and get me. Who gon' check me? Who gon' check me? Who gon' check me? With a nigga burn up like it's a hold up, hold up. I know what, make a nigga rolled up like fruit roll up. Sleep your face rolled up, make you get that gold up. I thought I told ya, my squad full of soldiers. He hold us, my controllers, my bars break boulders. I used to be sky high till I went solar, pushing white like polar. Bunch of hot rollers, who the fuck gon' check me? Used to be commuter love, too many computer thugs, drive-by strollers, talk shit till I catch you walking with your stroller. Put it on everything under the sun, smack it in front of your son like you my son for talking vulgar. I will catch you like I told ya. I let a lot slide since I got older. OG, think you bolder, get more colder than a shoulder. I get over. Who gon' check me? Who gon' check me? Who gon' check me? Who gon' check me? Trying to disrespect me, haters come to get me. Who gon' check me? 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 Trying to disrespect me, haters come to get me. Who gon' check me? Who gon' check me? Freeze.
Never club B, when I'm in the club G. Though I know the thugs be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubble? Don't never drug B, when I'm in the club G. Though I know the thugs be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the I'm moving smooth as Bugsy, or be at the bar with too much bubbly.
I play the club scene, burning down gasoline. Couple liquor, taking shots of full magazine. Money ain't a thing, I got a lot of that. For your queen a drink, now she wanna chat. Hopping in my lap, trying to shoot a shot. Claim she wanna get low and turn it up a notch. Got me touching on the box like a pap smear. Haters looking at me mad, practically in tears. Lord, we in here, no doubt about it. I'm in my own world, but the club crowded. feet kicked up, flirting with the barmaid. She took my secret tip and told me that her bills paid. Send the DJ a list of my favorite songs. Heat gas, got him sipping Dom Perignon. Keep calm, smell the loot on the premises. On point, off safety for my nemesis.
Don't never drug me when I'm in the club, G. Though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubbly? Don't never drug me when I'm in the club, G. Though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubbly?
Yo, my shooter move like Sean back in 01. Ain't nobody stopping us from having fun. By the bar, that's regular, we need it, law. Slick Rick, Mr. T, yo, my neck's off. Get my flex on, bodybuilding competition. From the Southboard, I put the brick in Brick City. Dark shades on, living in the spotlight. They on their day jobs, talking about my nightlife. We not the same type, one night your main squeeze. Pimp like Pimp C, but living like a bum big. Club scene, a crime scene, if anything pop off. Soldiers at attention, ready like roll call. Last call for alcohol, law gets served first. I got your favorite stripper, glad that she came to work. All this thirst got me handing out Gatorade. Crystal for the chase, I call it lemonade.
Don't never drug me when I'm in the club, G. Though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubbly? Don't never drug me when I'm in the club, G. Though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubbly?
I can see what is your problem, my nigga, you know what the difference is. I bring them back to the table, that bread you will think that I'm making some sandwiches. All that you do is just say you gon' do it, that bullshit you foolish up in the head. If I send all of my niggas to get you, your block will be hot like the tanning bed. All of that nonsense is in your head. You run your mouth cause you with the feds. If you get caught, you gon' need your meds. And we gon' catch you while you in bed. We in your room with a bunch of shooters, so we'll look like a city just when you dead. Haunted by demons, don't fuck around, bring your body as soon as we cut your leg. Bitches are liars, but numbers don't lie, so I'm all about my money. You must be stupid if you think you with me, no, I'm not a dummy. Niggas is sick when they smell what I'm cooking, they nose won't be running. Used to be broke as a joke, when you check the punchline, ain't gon' be nothing funny. You could all say what you want, but only God can judge me. Difficult catch me a body, I wonder if God will love me. Money the root of all evil, so niggas bow the money. Whole lot of bricks on the table when we break it down.
Full of checks, moonwalking to the bankroll. I got action, action, action. Flexing while I'm in traffic. Take your man and tax him, cause love is not my passion. Billie Jeans on with a pocket full of checks. Moonwalking to the bankroll. I got action, action, action. Flexing while I'm in traffic. Take your man and tax him, cause love is not my passion. Sitting pretty, money is the motive. I'm focused. Don't hang with too many, cause they bogus. Quick to cut them off, G Nicole, I'm the coldest. Turned into a boss, now I'm baked potato loaded. My pockets got my Billie Jeans long and my money steady stacking. You lacking? Okay, I got action. And it's Gabrielle Nicole, so please don't call me Gabby. Mirror, mirror on the wall, now tell me who the baddest. Billie Jeans on with a pocket full of checks. Moonwalking to the bankroll, I got action, action, action. Flexing while I'm in traffic. Take your man and tax him, cause love is not my passion. Billie Jeans on with a pocket full of checks. Moonwalking to the bankroll, I got action, action, action. Flexing while I'm in traffic. Take your man and tax him, cause love is not my passion. If I see a duck, he get plucked, closed caption. My account fantastic. One check did a somersault, the other did a backflip. My money dramatic. Moonwalking to the bankroll, I be laughing. I just want the money, some more money and the fashion. If your man don't got no cash, then he ain't up for grabbing. Gucci's in my pocket, no wrench, but I be dressing though. Baddest in the city, you know, and I'm the next to blow. Billie Jeans on with a pocket full of checks. Moonwalking to the bankroll, I got action, action, action. Flexing while I'm in traffic. Take your man and tax him, cause love is not my passion. Billie Jeans on with a pocket full of checks. Moonwalking to the bankroll, I got action, action, action. Flexing while I'm in traffic. Take your man and tax him.
That little bitch, y'all don't know it, but she mine. Shawty A1, swear to God, I ain't lying. And you ain't never had a real one, copped her down. Damn, little mama, why you do this all the time? They hating on the kid while they running out of time. I'm crippied up, but you know I'm bullying with my slime. My other bitch hit me, baby, I ain't got the time. Working overtime, time to stay up on my grind. And shawty, she gon' make that ass clap for them dollars. Take it up, then bring it home to Papa. Girl, you slim, thick, look something like a model. We VIP waiter, yeah, I need another bottle. Everywhere we go, the bitches gon' follow. Smack $100 bill off a stripper bottle. Yeah, order more gold bottle. I ain't never ever claimed to be a role model.
Oh, baby girl, go hard. No disrespect to the person that you are. You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch. bad little bitch. Shooting, lighter than a shooting star. Bad bitch, and I noticed that you are. Okay. You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch. Bad little bitch. Oh, baby girl, go hard. No disrespect to the person that you are. You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch. Back that ass up real quick. Stupid, thick, thin by far. Make that ass clap, booty cheeks going hard. You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch. Bring that ass here real quick. Spittin', and I'm staying with my squad. She say she wanna get it, she gon' ride. Doing splits off the pole, splits off the dick. Oh baby, that's what you get. Oh baby girl, go hard. No disrespect to the person that you are. You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch. Bad little bitch. Shooting, lighter than a shooting star. Bad bitch, and I noticed that you a bad little bitch.
Black rappers on the TV and radio. Some going platinum, some going gold. I don't know who they know, but it's suspect. I make hits, man, why I need a mixtape? Kinda great when you keep putting fire out. I'm the only person that can put my fire out. We fired up, somebody call the firehouse. When I rap, man, people say quiet down. Law come to town, they shut down the airport. The way we move make them wonder why we there for. Pharaoh goblins on my face cost 2 bands. Hop in sedans not made on this land. Nah, them the foreign joints. I got a plan all mapped out ready for me. I produce a whole gang of dudes to do their numbers. Every summer we chillin' with the pretty women. Got my brother on live showing how we living. Life in every day already automatic. We in the fly whips, double park with the hazards. It get graphic when I speak about my real life. Freestyle like a mixtape on site. Whack rappers on the TV and radio. Some going platinum, some going gold. I don't know who they know, but it's suspect. I make hits, man, why I need a mixtape? We deserve non-stop on the radio. I spit a verse and they say I really brought it home. I'm in the club on the phone with the club owner. He say he paid me a little extra if I stay longer. Sick capacity of law still showing up. I'm sipping off 2 bottles, 1 cup. Didn't know I could make all this in one night. We stepping out the club when it's light outside. Smell the look, early morning bitches. Customized van rolling like grandma. Lifestyle get publicized by B-Star. FBI taking pictures like the paparazzi. Bronx Club, well, we meet about in Spanish Harlem. Causing carnage in the hood like a mad villain. But that's the roundabout me there, say your boy chillin'. Spilling liquor on kicks that cost a couple $100. On YouTube stunting, but a brother won it. Out there. Whack rappers on the TV and radio. Some going platinum, some going gold. I don't know who they know, but it's suspect. I make hits, man, why I need a mixtape?
Danger. I'll bring it back. Brace yourself. I put your head in your lap. Taste yourself. Your man running up is a waste of help. On my Jeffrey Dahmer, cut out your heart, throw it in the grinder. Cook pancakes and use it as my Aunt Jemima. The dark side of my thoughts rise when I'm caged in. I talk slicker than Ali at the weigh-in. I should end it here, but I got more in store. I won't get into detail of shipping them retail and making them greet me like the Lord of War. Trying to stack my paper, not be mad at you, cause I'm curious about the culture in Africa. They want me living life something like Attica, so I'm forced to smash your melon like Gallagher. Please do remember how I can get you. Rip your days in half and leave your calendar dismembered. And so it seems the spotlight's on me, so I'ma get the streets what they need. They want that fire. They want that fire. I'ma give them that fire. I'ma give them what they need. And so it seems the spotlight's on me, so I'ma get the people what they feed. They want that fire. They want that fire. I'ma give them that fire. I'ma give them what they need. Cream on the inside, brown on the outside. Talking about my dick chick, open up your mouth wide. You're on one static, change the channel. I can arrange the vigil, just bring some candles. Hit your block like some eggs, how I made them scramble. After that, I'm taking off like Cape Canaveral. I was the force underground with the bass and treble. Now I'm the heat on the surface like a solar panel. Fuck the song, it's literal how I do a hater. Leave the body in a tree, call it human nature. Beat your ass with my belt buckle, booty tang ya. Fumigate ya, think you the shit, I duty stain ya. Dig a hole and let a mole find you. Forget 2 guns, you see 4 arms like I clothesline you. Class is in session if the magnum is the weapon. Somebody get him some help like the classified section. So it seems the spotlight's on me, so I'ma get the streets what they need. They want that fire. They want that fire. I'ma give them that fire. I'ma give them what they need. And so it seems the spotlight's on me, so I'ma get the people what they feed. They want that fire. They want that fire. I'ma give them that fire. I'ma give them what they need. In my lane, no games. I'm trying to just win. So I'm a man up, like 9 against 10. I'm hotter than the sun, who wanna shine against him? Got a swimming pool jab, it'll dive in your chin. Y'all act real funny and I'm trying not to grin. How you run to jail but can't dial out the pen? I work shorty out like I styled in the gym, but keep a low profile, proud with the brim. It's me and my team, so grab the towel, throw it in. That's hardcore beef like a cow with some Timbs. Come to my dojo, we can bow and get it in. Crack on the streets, got the competition looking slim. Creme de la creme, yo quiero cualquiera. Let me stop. My flow is a spatula, how I control the pot. My blood pressure cracking the levee over the top, and I can drive the streets crazy, getting show for the nuts. So it seems the spotlight's on me, so I'ma get the streets what they need. They want that fire. They want that fire. I'ma give them that fire. I'ma give them what they need. And so it seems the spotlight's on me, so I'ma get the people what they feed. They want that fire. They want that fire. I'ma give them that fire. I'ma give them what they need. And so it seems the spotlight's on me, so I'ma get the streets what they need. They want that fire. They want that fire. I'ma give them that fire. I'ma give them what they need. And so it seems the spotlight's on me, so I'ma get the people what they feed. They want that fire. They want that fire. I'ma give them that fire. I'ma give them what they need.
This your boy DJ JFK.
Scat all
Handed.
Old Styles, what up, brother? Yeah, yo, shouts out to, you know what I'm saying, Underworld, UTV Raps, you know what I'm saying, my nigga Old Styles, you know what I'm saying, respect, Scat RP, you know what I'm saying, when I'm watching and listening, that's what I'm listening to, Underworld, UTV Raps, you know what I'm saying, salute.
Beats by Meta, man. Quest lines are definitely open, 856-270-8846. We live in the building, y'all. Underworld Radio. Let's go.
The new age of hip hop,
Priority artists mix CD. We about to definitely go hard. These are the artists that you will hear in rotation on our shows, UTV Raps, Underworld Radio. All promotion going through from the Underworld television scene, Underworld movement. It's your boy DJ JFK. We about to get into these priority artists. Much love and respect to all the priority artists that's on this CD and on the next one and the next one. You know how we do. We gonna keep it going. Let's get into this CD, man. Priority artists.
Coast to Coast Mixtapes.com.
A dope beat and a dope bitch. For sure, a dope house and a dope whip. I got it from the kitchen with the chicken flip. It's done like every time when I leak the spit. You run from 16s like it's the big fifth. No doubt, cause that's sugar that you dealing with. Arm, leg, arm, head, right here 100%. Stand on it, build on it, drop on it every inch. Before it starts, collect the bag, don't it make sense? If not, it don't add up, then I'm excellent. Paid for mine's professional excellence. High grade to the levels you never seen this shit. Invisible sets and Corvettes, I ain't get it yet. When the time come, you can have it. I'm about to check. Made this great, ain't cost me much but a pawn. A bomb threat with syntax and napalm. Nigga.
Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. need. Music be my medicine. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Yeah. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine.
A notebook and some quiet time. No doubt, a loud pack and some tracks divine. My bag, I'm all in it, you can feel the lines. It's words when I spill it, it's my lifetime. You dudes pay a lot for the lights line. Myself, I'm in the back with the real grind. Like fuck it, you's a savage and you love swine. Scattered tats the veggies so you running high. Behind your mumble rap, auto-tune rhymes. It's love, do your thing, I'ma grab mines. For sure, 25-8 as I climb. Some hate is all facts, dumb, deaf and blind. I'm humble when I network intertwine. I travel, move state to state through them lines. For lawyers to see the kid, they hold the scat sign. It's digi, a bomb threat, Semtex and napalm.
Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Yeah. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Yeah. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine.
A big loft, sit back, recline. Okay, I do my thing, you damn right, it's mine. I come from a spot, you gotta blow the grind. Stay low, out the way before the page is fine. It's that simple, the way of crime. Reality rap now and since the past time. Under the sun, there's nothing new to life ride. Fuck out of here, family first is how we rise. Without music, I'm throwed off, I realize. It's like I need my meds from the doctor scribe. Samples and loops, boom, bad biz my high. Hold up, you do you, I'm at the finish line. I'm focused up, out of sight, out of mind. Get into it, the agriculture diamond shine. New project, release be the 5th time. Hey yo, a bomb threat, Semtex and napalm.
Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Yeah. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Music be my medicine. This is what I need. Music be my medicine. Yeah. Music be my medicine.
Out the right for her. I got them looking like they never seen the car before. Went hard for her, stayed in the trap for her. Catch a body for her, ain't nobody